Okay, hi everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. So make your way to your seat. Grab some food if you need to. There's plenty of it. Don't make me take it all home. Okay, welcome. My name is Clancy Nixon. I'm the Community Engagement Specialist for the city, and we are really excited to present to you some of our feedback that we received. We did a big push for those of you who maybe didn't know. We did a big push for community feedback regarding the Downtown's Next Step project because we have the 30% preliminary design at this point, and we wanted to get community feedback on that. So before I get too far, food's over here, drinks as well. If you didn't get a chance to sign in, please do so. I promise I won't inundate you with a lot of boring emails. It'll just be updates on upcoming meetings here and there. I don't send very many emails to that list. And it also helps with our community engagement data. So I'm going to be presenting this evening. I did want to introduce Alyssa over here. Hi, Alyssa. If anybody has any kiddos that they need babysitting for, we do provide free babysitting during these meetings. Doesn't look like anybody's in need of that. I didn't see any kiddos come in. And then usually we have interpretation as well. And I don't know where our interpreter is tonight, I'm going to be honest, but she was supposed to be here. But usually we have interpretation. And it doesn't look like, there she is. Olivia made it. No worries. It doesn't look like anybody needs your services, Olivia, so we're all good. Perfect timing. But how this meeting goes, so I'm going to present, and Devin King, our multimodal manager, is also going to come up and present about some of how this is going to impact the design, but we'll get there here in a second. I'll start by reading our Indigenous land acknowledgement. This is a call to honor and respect Indigenous sovereignty and self-determination. As residents and visitors of Durango, we are called upon to educate ourselves about the history and cultural heritage of the land we inhabit. The city of Durango is situated on the ancestral homelands and territories of the Nuchu, Ute, Jicarilla Apache, Pueblos of New Mexico, Hopi Sinom, Hopi, and Dene Navajo nations. The original stewards of this land were forcibly removed and exposed to countless atrocities by the United States government, including repeatedly broken treaties, forced assimilation, the tragic legacy of Indian boarding schools, and the loss of ancestral homelands. We recognize lasting generational trauma exists within Native communities today. We affirm the continuing importance of ancestral sites to descendant communities as integral to the living cultural landscape. This acknowledgement only becomes meaningful when combined with accountable relationships and informed actions. May this serve as a step toward inclusion and reconciliation. Okay, so if this is your first Engage Durango forum, we host these every other month. We will wrap up for the year actually in September because generally people are busy in November and December of the year. So what this looks like is we do a short presentation at each of our Engage Durango forums, and then we do a short Q&A. It'll be about 20 minutes. And then the rest of the time we really dedicate for you all to be able to learn more about our different city departments. So we'll have a breakout session where you can visit with a lot of our staff members here. I know there's at least one counselor here. And so there's a number of folks at the administrative level as well as elected officials who usually are in the room with us. So we'll probably go around and do some introductions if time allows, but feel free to grab food at any point throughout the presentation. So thank you. If any of you showed up to our Downtown's Next Step meetings, thank you so much. Our community showed up. We had a huge turnout we had 4 meetings. The meeting attendance you can see up here. We had business owners. Actually, I was expecting them to be the largest meeting, and they were beat by the residents. So business owners were at 74, downtown employees, we had 28 attendees, 99 residents, and 25 for the accessibility focus meeting. We had 226 total attendees. 131 detailed worksheets were turned in. We asked for a lot of open-ended comments and feedback, and we had 131 of those come back to us. And then we had 267 sticky note comments. So we rolled out a full design roll plot for the preliminary design and asked for comments with sticky notes. And then we had 29 visitor questionnaires. We posted QR codes all throughout the Welcome Center, asked the train to post it as well, and had 29 responses there. And so our total comments that we have received and that we're looking through and analyzing is 1,744. So we had a ton of feedback that came from the community. And that is incredibly helpful in our next step in getting to the 60% design phase. So thank you all for showing up. We really want this to be a community project, and you definitely showed up to make that happen. I wanted to start off also with a couple of comments on kind of both sides of the spectrum. So there were two comments that I felt like would really illustrate kind of the feedback that we gathered and what we are looking at and how important it is for us to compromise. Because we have folks, as you all, if you attended any of the meetings, you saw on both sides of the spectrum, people are feeling very, very passionate about this project. So I want to read this for comment first. So for, be a community leader and push the max amount of bike ped infrastructure possible. Leading sometimes means not caving to the loudest complainers and doing what is right for Durango in the long term. Please do not settle for anything less than bold, creative, imaginative spaces for cyclists and peds, and yes, cars too. Thank you. And there was an against comment on the other side of the spectrum. The infrastructure needs replacing. Do it. We need to close Maine to do this. Do it and leave the town the charming historic place millions of people come here to enjoy. We're not a front range Tinseltown or Grand Junction with curves. Please listen to the majority of the people here. Don't just hold meetings and waste people's time when you're not going to listen to them. And so I just wanted to give that to you, that there are a lot of folks between those two answers, right? And in the analysis and what we're trying to do as a staff team is we're trying to gain a better understanding of what our community wants. And there are going to be compromises, and we're going to have to balance not just community residents, but also some of our technical stakeholders, which Devin's going to talk about a little bit as well. So top community themes that came out of our engagement. So universal themes across all groups. Parking had the most mentions. So this is by mention throughout all of our engagement methods. So we have 535 mentions of parking. Pedestrian safety and accessibility came second. There's strong support. Business impact and economic considerations, traffic flow, and infrastructure replacement. That being said, these appear consistently across all stakeholder groups. The curb extensions are rolled into parking and traffic flow depending on the feedback, and then the loading zones are rolled into business impacts for the most part. I will say parking is mentioned many times because who filled out a worksheet? Raise your hand if you filled out a worksheet. We had a lot of parking questions, right? There are some parking questions, opportunities for parking comments that kind of led you there. So parking, we're not surprised that that came out as the front runner, as well as people that have a lot to say about parking. Okay, so by stakeholder group, we had different perspectives, but some of them were shared concerns. So business owners emphasize appropriate loading zone space for deliveries and customers. Traffic flow impacts from curb extensions, especially for large trucks, and preserving the buffer space between parked cars and traffic. Residents were focused on strong support. They had strong support for pedestrian bike improvements, environmental enhancements like trees and landscaping, and they had a pragmatic acceptance of most design elements. Accessibility community highlighted van accessible parking needs, clear pathways without obstacles, and there was universal support for pedestrian safety improvements. Downtown employees called out cycling, infrastructure improvements, delivery logistics questions they had, and employee parking availability. And in the visitor survey that we put out, Outdoor dining was the preference. We asked if they would prefer eating outside when the weather is nice, indoor or outdoor, and 83% of them said they preferred outdoor seating. Trees and shade was identified as a top amenity, and current parking satisfaction was at 62%. So where the community agrees, seems like you all are in agreement across stakeholder groups, I should say all of you. Utility infrastructure replacement, quote directly pulled from one of those comments, was high timely update. Pedestrian safety improvements, all groups support. ADA compliance enhancements, there's strong support across all groups. Sidewalk widening was generally positive, and expanding bistro and amenity space aligns with those visitor preferences from what we saw. Thoughtful art and amenities was called out as well, with emphasis on cultural sensitivity and preference for functional, accessible seating and shade elements. Okay. So some key concerns that were raised. So what keeps you as stakeholders up at night? The parking reduction keeps you up at night. So where will people go? This is a direct quote. Where will people go with the amount of lost parking? Loading zone adequacy concerns. 40 feet doesn't take into account lift gates was a quote that, and I've had phone calls with a number of folks and conversations with folks about those loading zones as well. And I know Devin has, in addition to what I've been receiving. Construction disruption, timeline and business impact questions. Winter operations was consistent. Snow removal is an issue with curb extensions, is the quote. And cost and ROI. What is the estimated ROI and the timing? Okay, jumping into the block by block feedback. So the block, this is in regards to the sticky notes that were put on the roll plot. We analyzed these. So some key themes that came out. So the blocks 500 to 700, we received 86 different sticky notes and comments. So tree and visibility conflicts with safety, curb extensions impacting restaurant access and traffic flow, ADA space maintenance and snow removal issues were identified, and a need for better ADA awareness campaigns. Blocks 800 to 900, there were 64 comments. Snow maintenance responsibility for curb extensions was raised. Seasonal adaptability, like removable planters. Loading, unloading logistics on raised intersections, and winter accessibility challenges. And then blocks 1,000 to 1,300 had 112 comments. So wheelchair accessibility around the planters, landscape maintenance with weeds and tree suckers, connections to Buckley Park, and truck turning capabilities and loading zone dimensions. So that's what came through in those Post-it notes. We had, again, 267 total comments. Accessibility had the highest engagement out of all the meetings, with 1.6 comments per attendee with those sticky notes. The overall patterns, that 1,000 to 1,300 blocks received the most feedback, as you can see, with parking and loading access being consistent concerns across all areas. Winter maintenance and ADA accessibility are prevalent themes, suggesting these are priority issues for the community regardless of location. Okay, so amenity preferences. This is where we asked on those worksheets to rank your amenity preferences and your choices. This is going to be interesting with the slide that comes right after it, so hang with me. So we have street trees. I'm going to read these. So the top one is seating, because our projector is a little fuzzy. Seating, street trees, sculpture, public art, shade elements, public restrooms, or none. Street trees came out as the top dog in the rankings, and then followed closely by seating, public restrooms, shade elements, sculpture, public art, and none. Okay, but here's the next slide. When we asked about tree prioritization, would you prioritize installing more trees over prioritizing sidewalk space, bistro areas, amenity zones, and art or sculptures, 60% of you said no. So this is an interesting side-by-side with the data. So when you put trees in and you say, do you like trees, essentially, along with these other elements, of course we all like trees. But then when you pit them against kind of the give and take elements of the project of like, if we have more trees, we may have to sacrifice on other things. It comes out this way. So it's an interesting bit of data, and again, highlights kind of some of the balancing act that we're doing with this analysis of the data and the design of the project. Also, it's funny, you know, I think along with trees, for instance, if we ask Matt Biesecker, who is city arborist, if we should prioritize trees, of course he says yes, and he has the data to back it up. You ask DFPD, for instance, if we should plant more trees and put more trees out there, they say no, generally, because of fire mitigation and risk. And they have data to back that up. So those are some of the types of things that we're having to perform this balancing act with in the design of the project. So just one perfect example, I feel like that came through the data. Okay, so sentiment analysis. So on some of the comments that we received, so we called out curb extensions, extended sidewalks, bike parking, left turn lane, just to name a few. And we did the sentiment analysis on the comments. Sentiment analysis is not as easy and clear cut as you would think. Like it's either yes, no, or maybe, right? That's not the case, because when we have this high quality qualitative data where we're asking like very open-ended questions or prompts, there's going to be varied responses in there. So for instance, curb extensions, we had to be careful with our sentiment analysis, because if somebody expressed support for curb extensions, of course, they're going in positive. But somebody could have said, I don't like the curb extensions that are in this design as written. I want them to be longer. That could potentially go into negative, but we put that into the positive, just so you know. So if somebody was in support of curb extensions in general, even if they wanted them longer, they went into that positive category. Mixed is somebody expressing kind of both sides of the coin. I see the give and take. I like this. I don't like this. Negative is they flat out don't want it, and neutral, they didn't express a clear opinion one way or the other. Make sense? So that's curb extensions. Similar for extended sidewalks. You know, some people want those wider sidewalks, not the 3.5. They want to go back to that 5 feet. And so if that's something that they expressed, hey, we want the wider sidewalks, we put them into the positive category. Yes, they do like extended sidewalks. And same kind of analysis with that sentiment there. With bike parking, it gets a little bit more interesting, because some people say they liked how it was currently, they liked bike parking. They feel like we should have parking stalls, right? So that's an obvious positive. But then you have folks who say, yes, we should have bike parking, but it shouldn't be on Main. It should be around the corner on the side streets. So they got put into the neutral category. But they like bike parking, however, they don't want it on Main. So we put them into the neutral category if somebody made that kind of response. Mixed use, yes and no. Negative, straight up, we have too much bike parking. We don't want any more. Make sense? Left turn lane. The negatives include folks who want to remove the center turn lane and create a bike lane instead. Some people express that interest. Get rid of the center turn lane. We want that to be a bike lane, or want a bike lane instead of that. Or people who don't think a turn lane is needed. So that goes in the negative category. Neutrals are folks who want to leave it as is or didn't express a clear opinion. Cool. So that's some of the sentiment analysis that we have from the worksheets. And I'm going to turn it over to Devin to talk to you about how this is influencing the design.
Thanks, Clancy. Good evening, everybody. Appreciate it. So what does all this feedback mean for the design? You know, now that we have it, how do we actually use it, and what is it going to be? So parking, obviously, Clancy pointed out how that was the #1 talked about. So we will be reevaluating the space link to add parking. So one thing we heard is we looked at basically the code requires us to have 22-foot spaces versus 20-foot spaces, but we've also heard that from county residents, especially that they would like to see longer spaces. However, when we reached out to the public with this plan, we heard from a lot of folks that, hey, we'd rather just see more parking spaces and we can have longer vehicles parked on the cross streets. So we're going to have to look at that and take a look at our parking code requirements, what would be required, and where we can potentially get some more spaces back. Loading, investigating the needs and options further. So, by the way, a quick correction. We said that the loading zones were 40 feet in our presentation and during the outreach, but they're actually 44 feet. That was my mistake. So we will be looking into that regarding the lifts and dropping for the actual deliveries. So one of the main things is right now in the summertime, most people are delivering in the center left turn lane. But in the wintertime, we don't have that available when snow is being stored in that center left turn lane. So we're trying to figure out how best to have loading and unloading curbside. And that's one thing we will be reaching out to more of the delivery companies and having further conversations and trying to figure out how to fit that in the design while also not sacrificing parking spaces. Winter maintenance, again, another highlighted comment from a lot of folks. So, whether we're talking about wider sidewalks or the curb extensions, how do we make sure that that is efficiently plowed in the wintertime, efficiently swept in the summertime, and that drainage and everything that needs to occur down there is still able to efficiently happen. So we are making further adjustments for snow storage and removal. We're having conversations about the tapers for the curb extensions and making that easier for snow plows, and then taking a look at the sidewalk and how we can make that easier to maintain as well. Amenity zones. So Clancy touched on the trees. One of the big things with trees is if we put a tree here, that limits space for other things like seating or bistro space. So again, there's that give and take. So we will be going through determining materials. So specifically when I say materials, I'm talking about what's on the ground. So we heard a lot from our accessibility folks who have accessibility needs in the community. We heard a lot about different textures, concrete, different stone types and stuff from that group. Locations. So, where can we put seating? Where can we put trees? Where can we put certain other elements like sculptures, etc. Size of curb extensions. So some of these amenity zones, we could potentially shrink, we could potentially expand, and we can also change the locations of them. And then furnishings, going back to the seating, trash can receptacles, things of that nature. Accessibility, we will be, one of the big things we heard is folks who have accessibility needs expressed desire for more parking spaces than we were showing that were accessible, and not just on cross streets. They want them on the block. So we will be looking at where we can add more and then adjusting locations. They don't want to see them just at the end of the blocks. They want to also see them in the middle of the blocks. So how do we balance all this? Basically, the way this graph is going, we have the overall project goal. And then essentially from left to right of importance, we have the public feedback. It is important. However, it does not necessarily go beyond technical needs. And what I mean by technical needs is, deliveries, maintenance, DFPD response, utilities in those locations, drainage. So those are what we mean by technical needs. Environmental constraints, that's building. We only have so much space out there, and then there's building facades. And we can't obviously go past the building facades. There's also existing trees, there's existing drainage and other elements. And then we have laws and requirements. Those are things that we have to follow, things that we have to do. And some of those are state, some of them are federal, and then some of them are even local. And then all that kind of fits under the umbrella of the project goal, which is safety, accessibility, and utilities and economic improvement. So basically, we're trying to balance all of these needs and get to a project goal that works for the whole community, but then also works for the objectives of this project. So with that, I will turn it over to Clancy.
Okay, what's coming? What's next? So we have, let's see here. We are currently at the Engage Durango Forum in July circle. Next is going to be a council study session that's slated for September 5th right now, is kind of what we're eyeing, to present a more detailed summary of the feedback. Like I said, again, we had over more than 1,700 comments come in from the community. And so it's a bear to analyze, and it was all pretty much qualitative data, not quantitative. So it takes a long time to kind of siphon through it. we were able to give you kind of that high level view. We'll probably break into it a little bit more with council at an upcoming study session, which again, slated for September 5th. The 60% design is gonna happen this fall, and then we will present that back to the community with potential, like some tweaks and asking for smaller feedback. And then we go to the 90% design and the final design and the engineer's estimate. That's where we'll know like what that dollar amount is. And then it's full stop based off of that resolution from council. We are not going to construction unless we have a change with council and they say go for it. So again, that 60% design meeting, I think I failed to mention, it's expected in October. So for those of you who signed in, we'll definitely get an email out to you as soon as we have that scheduled. Okay, so we're going to jump into the Q&A at this point. Before we kind of jump into all of that, I do want to highlight, please let us know how we did tonight with our Engage Durango forum. We have a QR code where you can fill out a quick survey to let us know. And then the QR codes are actually back by the table, and then those iPads that you signed in on will be set up for that survey if you don't want to do it on your phone or something. And then that other QR code right there is to check out our Engage Durango website. Who's been there? Engage Durango. Hey, I'm starting to see more hands go up in the room. Engage Durango is our engagement website. We have 37 different projects highlighted on the website, and most, if not all, should have an opportunity for feedback on, unless they're closed projects. So just a heads up there, if you want to learn more and get tons of different resources about our projects, project timelines, those types of things, check out Engage Durango. We'd love to have your feedback there as well. So, okay, we're going to open it up for questions. We're going to do about 20 minutes, and then we'll break out into the table session. So who has a question? Yes, Karen.
Why is engineering brought in so late in the process?
Engineering brought into so late into the
So
process?
late in the process.
I'll let them.
And there identified technical issues that I'm important to engineers and engineering.
Yeah, that's a good question. So basically we start with the community and we start with what does the community want to see? And then we get sketches down on the paper. And then that's when we take it to engineering to see what can we actually fit and what's actually possible. Basically, if we do the engineering first, we're going to miss out on a lot of that community feedback because by that point we've spent a lot more money and we can't really change what we've gotten at that point. So that's why engineering comes after we do the major community outreach and public feedback.
So at those engagement meetings, you had those really long drawings with every block. Awesome. Remember, we had like 8 minutes to look at them.
Yeah.
It might be too late at this 30%, but I might suggest that those be made available at places like this. Library, maybe bid office, main mall, and especially when you get to 60, if there's ways outside of the meetings to let people come in and look at their block and their business, or the area they care about.
Yeah.
that'd be good.
That's a great suggestion. Yeah, thanks, Tim.
I thought I heard you mention sidewalks as being 3 feet or 5 feet. In the materials that we got from the last meeting I was at, it was 8 foot travel pathway versus 5.5 feet.
Oh, yeah, sorry if that was confusing. 3.5 feet extension from what it's at now is what's currently proposed in this 30% preliminary design.
So I've been walking these sidewalks with that 8 versus 5.5 in my head, and I haven't put a piece of tape down, but it doesn't take a lot to see what the impact would be if you're walking in 5.5 feet with the traffic you get on the sidewalks. If you could just put something down like you've done for the curb extensions so that people can walk down the sidewalk and see how narrow that would be, you might get more people on the let's widen the sidewalks bandwagon.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm back.
This thing does go through. Down there. Up the bricks. There was some concrete.
The materials was brought up as a question for the community, but I can let Devin answer that one.
currently is proposed to keep the bricks and to add more bricks where we are adding sidewalk or doing any sort of curb extensions down on that block. Yeah, and again, that's why we do the community feedback, and try to get voices, but I mean, there's a lot of voices in the community in general, so we are looking at that corridor as a whole, and not just block by block, but as far as the community, I think we've kind of shared what we have heard from them, and there is a lot of support for the project and elements of it.
Yeah, sweetie.
About the curb stations. I was on Main, ready to turn left to college. I saw the poles. I backed up about 8 feet. At that moment in time, just a guy's pickup truck, to avoid the poles, he came into my area. He would have taken out my front end, and I'd been sitting where I normally wait to turn left with them. My concern is right there, real life catastrophe. And I am very concerned about the curb extensions.
Thank you for that.
Thanks, sweetie. And that's actually why we put up those temporary ones, was to test the turning radiuses. And the only one that we've really seen a problem with is that one at College in Maine. So we are looking at a few adjustments. One is we can move that stop bar back for the left turn, like you were mentioning. Basically, that's essentially what you did. So that's one option. The other option is bringing that curb extension in, and we're going to continue to evaluate that and test that. But we hear your concerns on that.
Yes, in the back next to sweetie.
I want to just pull out a little bit that you're saying. I'm hearing the message that public wants this, that you got out and you collected enough kids, and that there's a groundswell really wanting to start. So those voices are already just. Also, and so that's like, it's, and in opposition, direction, you seeing what it's really meant for, which is bringing up, keeping these feasible, so that you can go and stay in business. I mean, that should have just a different slicing of it. The other thing is, in relation to this, is you shouldn't be listening to. I mean, city is talking about now is back to the parking in my neighborhood. They were shared by a lot of people. Is downtown, your idea to do back in 7th Street and then expand it to fix in my house and 8th Street. And this way along to 9th Street, 10th Street, 11th Street, 12th Street. And I have never been asked of whether or not and there's a strong concern as what's happening is that you're kind of taking the permission that you're going to have all these apartment spaces to offer up to tourists, so to park along that back area in my neighborhood.
Yeah,
And that then, that's what. Like, one of the bosses of the spaces, for project. When do you ask people to do it directly? How much does that matter to us?
it matters a lot. So for that 7th Street demonstration project that you're referencing, it's a 12-week demonstration project. It's temporary and it is for receiving feedback from the users of that corridor. Devin, you can jump in on this one. And then to address like the parking, there has been a narrative that is getting shaped in the community that that's our solution for losing parking downtown. That actually doesn't, I think one space is affected by changing the parking. And so it doesn't add any parking in your neighborhood by changing that parking how it is now, just to clarify that. So there's no, I think it's a one spot. Is that correct?
Purple.
Okay.
Somewhere. Yeah, thanks. So what's occurring on 7th as far as speed management plan, which is not done. In fact, what we're doing right now is collecting community feedback. So we did do a survey. These demonstration, as Clancy said, are 12 weeks at max. That's all the Federal Highway Administration will allow. So we will have those out there for just a temporary bit to get feedback. But again, it is to receive feedback. We are not planning it on 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, none of those streets. And then in terms of just in general with this project, as I mentioned, one of the things that we heard a lot about was parking. And so that is actually what we are trying to put more of back in this plan. And, you know, that all came from feedback from the public, from businesses, from visitors, from others. You know, I mean, those are all things that we are taking into account to ensure that we do what, again, overall project goal, safety, accessibility, economic stability, and utilities. I think I don't have the goals up in front of me right now. But basically, we're trying to get to that end goal. And how do we do that? With the community feedback, with business needs, business desires. It's not just saying no businesses, what you feel. We do care what businesses feel and what they want and what they need. And we're trying to work that into the plan.
And we're happy to talk to you a little bit more about that speed management plan as well. Transportation will be right up here to chat.
So, my understanding that you're proposing a reduction of 36 parking spaces on this design,
It's currently at 38.
38.
Yes.
So 11 of those, the east side of the 500. So almost over a quarter of them are on one block. I happen to be the 500 block captain for bid. Nobody has been trying to open it on the 500. So you're talking about community engagements. That's a substantial reduction in parking on our end of the street. And nobody's been approached.
So what we do is we send out mailers. And then early on, I don't know, we've sent out several rounds of mailers, and that's both to property owners. We try to get them to businesses. Unfortunately, if a business uses a PO box, we don't have access to that. And then we obviously do news releases, press releases, other announcements, trying to get people to come in. I mean, we do go around and try to meet with some businesses, but it's difficult to get to every business. You know, I'll just say that we do have multiple projects. We try to get to multiple, but we also try to get people to contact us and set up meetings as well. But I do hear you, and we will make an effort to reach out to the 500 block folks.
They're not aware. I closed early so I can attend this. Most of them aren't going to do it.
Yeah. Thanks.
Saw that, Ham.
Parking is a recurring thing, both in and out of these meetings with the public. Whatever happened to the parking structure? I inquired some time back about it, and the response I got was, we're looking to do something different. But gotta find a place to park the car. So I'm just curious where the parking structure stands. It's been, you know, that plan's been out there for what, 15 years or more? 50 years. 50 years. Long time. So it's just a recurring theme we struggle with.
Yes, so right now our parking structure is not in the plan. We did do a comprehensive management parking plan a couple of years ago that came up with, right now it's not necessarily needed. However, when it is needed, it gave us steps to get there. But I do know that we are going to do a parking feasibility study for a parking structure. And I will say that I'm not the person to talk about that because I don't know that much about it. So if you want, feel free to come back because Sarah Hill is the director of transportation. She can definitely provide a little more input on that. Yeah.
Meredith.
Well, I very much appreciate the fact that you able to voting. Clarify that. Like the question that I have, I know there's a lot of balance here, but so there's a desire to add parking, but there's a desire of loading on the sides. So are you, how is that all written? Oh, I don't know how that change is possibly.
Yeah, I don't either. I'll let you know when we have a final answer on that. But what we are looking at is, So one option that we were contemplating is, you know how we have snow routes, if there's more than 2 inches, then you don't park here. Well, there's a chance in the wintertime that we could create parking spaces that are adjacent to the curbside loading zones. That, you know, if we have snow in the center left turn lane, you cannot park in those 2 spaces. So it would mean a reduction in parking during the wintertime, but that's also a less busy time for downtown. So that's one option we're looking at. I don't know for sure yet. That's what we're all putting our heads together to try to figure that out.
And there's just challenges also in the types of trucks and how they unload. So you have the ones with the ramps and then a lot of your trucks with the side loads. So
And then
lots of
also,
things to consider.
yeah, the other thing that I will say right now in the wintertime, it's not great. So we actually made, this is just speculation at this point, but we may try testing a couple things this winter because right now, you know, the really big semi trucks, so the WB67s, I can't remember if Coca-Cola has any or not. But right now I've watched them in winter. I have pictures of them parked in the crosswalk because they can't currently fit in the loading zones. So yeah, we may even try some stuff out this winter and see what we can do.
Hold on, I just want to make sure there's no other hands that go up, just since you've already asked a question. I know I'll come back to you, Frank.
That's on parking.
All right, let's go for it.
What we learned from going around our color tables last time was, there's parking that's coming back into the mix that's not in your 38 shortfall from the movement of public safety, I think. And there's parking right now on the street that we
Yeah.
can't use. They're gonna go next to Buckley.
Yeah, so,
And Buckley has been discussed as a potential location for structured parking.
yes.
So can that get added to the conversation? Because that would help the narrative.
Yeah, none of these are set in stone, obviously, because there's going to be a whole process with community engagement, design, and all that fun stuff. But for instance, with PD, the Police Department, City Hall, that voters approved, basically funding for, that is going to move then all of those police vehicles off of the grid and into designated parking. So they would free up a number of spaces. Adding.
100?
I don't know. That's a good question for
That
Chief
number
Bram or
was
Chief
used at the
Current.
last session.
What'd you say?
That number was used as we were moving table to table. but-
Is that what it is? 100? Around 100? I couldn't remember the parking volume. I know the parking volume of what's going on at PD City Hall is something like 130, 188. Okay, wait, I was way off. Okay, so 188 parking spaces at PD City Hall because what it's currently designed is a parking structure, if you will, that is subsurface, that has more kind of secure parking for our police officers. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up because that is a key part of what we're looking at comprehensively across the city. Sharon?
So I've asked a few times, but have you ever determined what the definition is for flexible blocks that you keep throwing in?
Flexible blocks are intended to be spaces that have a different character than the others, that put pedestrians and cars essentially at the same level. So basically, there are spaces that feel more open instead of separated like we have now. So, you know, you have a sidewalk, you have a curb and gutter, and then you have pedestrians and then typically bikes. And so it's a little more of a free flowing type space that we could close more easily if we wanted to, just by the nature of the way they're constructed. And then people can walk in and out more freely and easily.
But will we have a definition of what that, like, basically you're saying festivals, but how many will be allowed and stuff before you start any of this process? Yeah.
So right now, the design includes 2. It includes the 900 and 1000 block. And that was chosen because 10th Street doesn't go all the way through. And there's no light or stop sign there. That's why that intersection is what was chosen. I guess by a definition of, I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure why we would put that in the code. I'm not sure why it would
It's like,
create
because you
a.
don't spend extra money on it, so, you know, before you go and put it in the plan, should you decide what it actually is to
Well,
be used for?
I mean, I guess,
Just like bistros are used for bistros.
yeah.
You know, things like that, you know.
I mean, I did mention what they were used for. I guess in terms of why they are even in the plan was when we originally reached out to the community, we had a lot of folks asking for a pedestrian wall. We didn't go that direction. And this is something that it's not even close to a pedestrian wall, but it's something where pedestrians are more focused on and are in industry terms, like, basically leveled up to a vehicle, and giving the same priority, the same space, et cetera.
All right, last question.
I'll just add to that if I can. I think it would be good to have some usage, some draft usage guidelines. We understand you might not know that fully, but I would imagine those blocks do cost more. And if that's the case, downtown would like to know, well, is there a limit to how often they can be used? Having festivals in downtown is awesome, not every day. Right? And so could there be an effort on the city as you move to 60% design on some draft usage requirements, which would allow a little better feedback from folks and allow you guys to look a little at the ROI? It's going to cost X more, but we're only going to get X times. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's my suggestion.
Okay, thanks, Tim. Okay, we're gonna jump into that breakout session, so you can learn more about different projects, because I heard a couple of them mentioned in the question and answer, so I want to make sure to give you time there. I do want to quickly go around the room so you can know who you're talking to and who's in charge of what, because a lot of our leadership team is here. So we're gonna start right here. He's our audiovisual guy who saves me on many occasions. Okay, yes.
I'm Rachel Hart, Parks and Recreation.
Okay, we gotta be really loud though, staff, okay?
Dr. Clay, Director of Parks and Recreation.
Hi, everyone. I'm Library Luke. I'm the director of your Durango Public Library.
Hi, everyone. I'm Heidi Wise. I'm from the finance.
Grace Byrne.
Claims research director.
Mr. Carlton, I'm the director, replacing director reloading. Was the manageable city manager?
Hurry up, it's coming.
Bob Lauer, you're director. Dick Johnson, public information specialist. Tommy Farrell, community economic opportunity manager with our prosperity office. Schools, moving manager.
Katie Cochran, the 911 director.
Ellen Babers, community events.
2030 report director.
Amy Monaco, community development director.
Sarah Hill, transportation director. Sorry, over here.
7K multi-home manager. James Long, with Public Works Department. Hi, folks. My name is Evan Tyler, and I'm also with Public Works.
Okay. Thank you all very, very much for coming. I appreciate all the feedback we've received, not just tonight, but throughout this last push for downtown's next step. I really feel confident that we'll meet in the middle with a bunch of these compromises and come up with something that is a design that really speaks to our community. So, and that's all because of you. So thank you very much for being here. Feel free to get some food, some drinks, and ask us some questions. Thank you.